Hello, hello, fearless listeners. Are you ready for another episode of Let Fear Bounce? It's the podcast that's all about conquering challenges and facing our fears. I'm your host, Kim Langling, and each week we'll dive into inspiring stories, expert insights, and practical tips to help you turn your fear into your greatest ally. So sit back, relax, grab that cup of coffee, and let's discover how to make fear our bouncing board towards a life filled with endless possibilities right here on Let Fear Bounce. Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Let Fear Bounce. This is Kim Langling, your host. Thank you so much, everybody, for deciding to spend just a small part of your day with myself today and my special guests. Yes, plural. I got two people with me today, and it is a married couple, the Outinis, Itto and Mekiya, and they are coming to us from Kansas City, Missouri. Now, Itto Outini, she is a journalist, a Fulbright Scholar, Steinbeck Fellow, MacDowell Fellow, public speaker, and author of the forthcoming memoir, Blindness is the Light of My Life. And Mekeyi is an award-winning author, freelance editor, MacDowell Fellow, and co-author of Itto's forthcoming memoir, Blindness is the Light of My Life. Both of their work has appeared in numerous places. They are multi-published authors, and I am excited to have them on. They also provide a platform, folks, to help others become the best storytellers that they can be. Now, how intriguing is that? I've been excited and looking forward to having them on the show so we can dig in and find out what spurred them to go in this direction. Welcome, both of you. Welcome to Let Fear Bounce.
It's great to
Thank
be
you
here.
so much. It's great to be here.
Now, I want to ask about the book first. It's a memoir, of course, which Itto, you both co-wrote it, but Blindness is the Light of My Life. Now, Itto, you are blind. So share a little bit about that journey and why you decided, we got to get this story out here.
It's a long journey. I don't think even if we spend like a whole day talking about it, but the brief summary is basically it's my life story. I am originally from Morocco, and for those of you who don't know where Morocco is, it's in North Africa. I am a native Moroccan. And well, I'm mixed. My mother was an Arab, and my father was a native Moroccan. I was born in the middle of nowhere. We didn't have access to electricity, running water, podcasts, nothing. But we are known for oral storytelling. So as a kid, I loved stories. My parents died when I was very young, so I unfortunately was not accepted or loved by my other family members. So most of the times I was alone, but I loved stories, and I told stories to animals and to myself. And for some reason, I just changed the characters as I go when I was a kid. But again, we didn't have access to education, so I didn't go to school. And I started school for the first time at the age of 17. I am 35 now. And in the span of less than 6 years, I graduated from high school, went to the university, studied English literature and then applied linguistics, and was awarded the Fulbright Scholarship to come to the US as to pursue my master's in journalism at the University of Arkansas. And that's where I met Mekeyi. But that's basically the whole, the memoir does not, of course, and will not cover my entire story, but it's my life story. The main purpose is to tell and show the world that a person like me exists, and through hard work and the power of self-love, you can accomplish anything you set yourself to accomplish.
And what a light that you will provide to so many with your book. Sharing your story, and just what you shared right now, it's incredibly inspiring. And in such a short time, you said the first time you had attended school was at the age of 17. Really not that long ago if you're just in your mid-30s.
I didn't even know how to read and write. I still remember my first day in school when my teacher asked me, "How do you spell your name?" And I just said, "You don't really have to spell it, you're
You just say it. That's
yeah,
enough.
you just
Right,
say
just say it.
that's enough.
Yeah. You had mentioned when you were younger that you lost your parents at an early age, and the rest of your family members didn't really I guess, care that much. I'm not sure how I want to word that, but what
Mhm.
was there a reason behind that, or was it because of your blindness, or it was hard for them to take on another mouth to feed? How did that come about?
It's actually hard even for me to explain. Morocco is known for family bonding. Like when I was in Morocco, I was heard a lot because other people had families and their families loved them. But I think for my family, there was a lot going on. As I said earlier, I am a mixed child. I am half Arab and half Amazigh or Berber, as most people know it. I actually was blinded by a family member at the age of 17. So it, I don't think there's only one reason. I think different people had different family members, I'd say, had different reasons for not wanting me. But I am grateful because if they wanted me, maybe I wouldn't be educated after all.
You wouldn't be doing what you're doing now. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Though the road may be bumpy, it got you where you were supposed to be.
Yes, I am grateful for everything that I've had to experience because I own my accomplishments. I haven't given anything for free. I've worked so hard to be where I am, and I believe in hard working and self-motivation.
No, I love that you just said I own my accomplishments, because that just made me want to throw my hands in the air and say, "You go, girl."
Thank you.
Oh, I'm telling you. No, yeah, you own them, obviously and definitely. What a story. And I know that that's just you just scratched the surface of your story, but I appreciate you sharing it, because I am sure that it even though you guys are storytellers, sometimes it's not always quite so easy to share your own story. So I appreciate you sharing that small part of it. So thank you.
Okay.
So Mekeyi, we got to talk to you too. What's your story, sir?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned it's difficult for people to tell their stories because for many years, it wasn't that I was reluctant to tell my story. It was actually more that I had been conditioned to believe that I didn't have a story. So I grew up in North Carolina in Asheville, and I was homeschooled for 16 years. My parents had largely dropped out of mainstream society. They had rebelled against it. They joined the organic foods movement, and they had a lot of frustrations with the way that society functions, many of which were valid, but they took that rebellion to a bit of an extreme. And I grew up very, very isolated. Even though we were in Asheville, which is not a particularly rural area, I didn't have a peer group. Between the ages of 7 and 12, I had only one friend. Before that, I didn't have any friends. And then when I was a teenager, I was part of some communities, but it was difficult to integrate with other people. And they were not particularly tight-knit communities, or to the extent that they were, I wasn't really part of that. Um, so I sort of found that I had a love of learning, and I thought academia would quench that. And so I went into academia, and that was one of the few things that I had access to books that whole time. So I wasn't connecting with other people, but I was connecting with other people's voices and stories through books. So I had a natural comfort in that zone, and I didn't really have very many other tangible skills, or there weren't many other paths for me, but I went into academia. I was really excited about it. I thought I was going to have a great time. I did enjoy my undergrad experience, but by the time I got to grad school, a lot of things were catching up with me. And but my parents had by that time, well, not by that time, that my whole life they had conditioned me to believe that they had broken all the cycles that they'd been born into and given me a completely fresh start. And when the generational trauma in my family started to catch up with me, when the mental health issues started to catch up with me, when I was struggling with anxiety and depression, thankfully, I didn't really struggle with substance abuse issues. I did get into drugs a little bit, but that could have been much, much worse. But there are also some pretty severe substance abuse issues in my family, which thankfully most of that missed me. I was convinced that I was responsible for restarting all of these cycles that my parents had supposedly ended. And it was only really last year that I started to unpack that experience, with support from Itto, because I really hadn't had any like sufficiently close connections before we got together like there was nobody who could support me through that process. And so I wasn't able to start that on my own. I realized I actually do have a story. And one of the most painful things for me the whole time was being a writer who believed that I did not have a story of my own to tell. That was more painful than some of the social isolation and some of the other things that I dealt with. Like it was torture to think, okay, I want to be a writer, but whenever I try to write about myself, it rings hollow and false because I didn't have, I wasn't, I didn't have my finger on the pulse of what I actually was. So now here I am. I've also written a memoir, a collection of essays about that experience. And I felt when Itto and I got together and we started working together on her memoir, I had the feeling that it was what I had been training myself to write the whole time, that there actually was, before I even really started to unpack my story, I felt, okay, here's actually a purpose. Here's a work of art that is, the story is powerful enough and we're together. So like there's an intimate relationship there too. And this is the project that justifies my spending all these years learning to write and not learning how to make money or support myself or any of these other things, but learning this one skill.
Listening to both of you, how your lives, it just feels like, as you know, as I was listening, it feels as if you guys were meant to meet. You were
in Arkansas.
In Arkansas. That's right. But it's I don't know, I feel that very strongly listening to your story, that you guys were meant to meet and to be a support to one another and to care for one another on both of your journeys, because you're able to share that you're able to share that with each other. And so often, and I'm including myself in this because I live with PTSD, and along with that comes anxiety and depression and, you know, good days, bad days. And there are so many times where you just feel like no one's going to get it. No one's going to understand you, or they're just going to look at you, you know, either in pity, or it's like, oh no, you're too much. You're just too much.
Well, one thing that I think my family is very acknowledging to the things that they did to me. I actually, while I was working on my memoir, I decided through a friend of a neighbor to contact one of my aunts. And of course, I am the only highly educated person in my entire family, both my father and my mother's side. When I talked with my aunt, I wanted to ask her, I said, if you guys knew that I would become a journalist, would you have killed me when I was a kid? And she was one of the only nice aunt I had. And she said, no, we know that we tortured you, we didn't love you, and I think because your mother died, and when your mother died, you basically are kind of like supposed to be just suffering. And she apologized and said, we're so sorry for what happened to you, but I want you to know that your family loves you, meaning that, you know, my family tortured me and abused me, but guess what? They still love me. But I don't want to speak for Mekeyi, but in his case, there is a lot of denial. Like, oh, we never did anything.
In my case, the cover-up is way worse than the crime, I feel like.
You know, like if someone does something and acknowledges it, even it's, in my case, in the name of love, right? My family tortured me, but in the name of love.
Okay, now I want to jump in here.
Yeah.
They tortured and abused you. They acknowledge that.
Yes.
But they love you.
They say so.
So they say so. What is it that you feel when you hear that?
Empty words.
Empty words.
Yes. As a writer, I have to love and value words. If I don't, then I have to leave the field, right? As someone who loves words, words to me mean things. If I say I enjoy being with you, or I love you, or I admire you, it has to be true. If it's not, I don't have to say it, because again, if words are empty, then they're useless.
Boom. Mic drop on that one. Empty words are useless. Did you ever carry anger or bitterness?
For a long time, yes. But again, the power of reading and the writing. Yesterday I was joking with Mekeyi. When I was learning English, we focused on 4 skills: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And yesterday I wrote a lot, and I also read. And I said, wow, I practiced all my skills today, because when he woke up, I was talking to him. So I did. The power of reading and the writing has helped me a lot. I am grateful to all authors that I've read. I personally think I met them, even those who died a long time ago or even are still alive and I didn't meet them. But I read that other people had the experience like mine or even worse sometimes. And I worked a lot on myself, and I learned how to love myself, and I learned how to let go. I don't say forgiving, because I think forgiving has a negative connotation. When people say forgive, most of the times they mean you go back to your abuser. I don't think that's healthy for anyone involved, but I have learned how to let go. And yes, I was angry, I was hurt, I was sad. And then, I learned that anger is useless, and it actually hurts the person who is angry themselves.
Yeah, and it feels as if you're giving the ones who hurt you more power.
Yes.
Goodness. Oh my, what an amazing conversation. I'm so glad you guys are my guest today. Mekeyi, Mekeyi, I want to ask you the same question. Did you carry anger or anything like that with you up until this point? Was there a point in your life where you're like, okay, no, I've got to let that go because I need to live my own life. I have my own journey, my own trail to blaze.
I carried a lot of anger toward myself. I mean, like I said, my process of like deconstructing my parents' narrative really only started last year. So up until that point, I felt like every year got a little bit worse because every year I had more like there was more pain, and I didn't want to direct that toward anyone else, and I didn't think anyone else, had done anything or deserve. I mean, you said that you have PTSD, and I'm so sorry to hear that. My father told me that I'd given myself PTSD at one point, and so I just started to hate myself more and more. And last year, it was like this, it was like a very deep gestalt shift that happened. And I would say generally, no, I don't feel angered. I don't feel bitterness toward people. But sometimes when we're going through a difficult situation, when there's some crisis that we're trying to deal with, and my parents are not there. I mean, I did put the barrier to our relationship. Like I'm responsible for them not being there anymore. But it was for a reason. It was because every time they tried to intervene in our lives, they would make things worse. And so I do sometimes when things are difficult, I feel some resentment and anger toward them for not being the sorts of people who could be there, who are willing to be there, in a way that's truly supportive. But that generally passes whenever the crisis passes. So I would say in daily life, no, I don't carry that with me, but it does sometimes get activated by the circumstances. But I think also it's maybe healthy because it's me practicing being angry at someone other than myself, and that's potentially a useful skill.
Look at all the skills we build through life.
Exactly.
I want to hop back to Itto. You had said when you were talking about when you were younger and you read a lot, you had access to books, so you might not have had the support and comfort of family members or the love of family members, but you had words and books and stories, and you would talk to yourself and you would talk to animals and all of that.
No, actually, when I was very little, I only talked to animals and rocks, but I didn't start school until the age of 17. So I didn't know how to read until after 17. And
Okay,
since
so
then,
I misunderstood then. Okay.
no worries.
Sorry,
So
I was the one with the books, and she was the one with the oral stories.
I mainly was like helping myself emotionally with oral stories, like of course, a lot of stories that were passed down by generations.
Yeah.
But when I went to school, that's when I learned how to read and write, and I fell in love with books. I actually, I think I was deeply hurt and sad from 2007, the time I started school, up to 2016. It took years of practice. And 2016 was the year of revolution for me. That was when I guess I woke up and learned how to love myself, and basically concluded that my life is in my hands and no one will be the one to change it but me. And I read 2014, 15, 16, up to like now, basically starting 2014 up to now. I make a list. Sometimes I read 365 books a year.
Wow. See, I thought I was an avid reader. It's like you're trying to catch up or something, huh?
Yes. Well, I wasted a lot of time. Imagine 17 years.
But that
I
wasn't due to your own doing though. So I wouldn't call it wasted time. You had all those stories in your head that you're talking to animals and rocks and whatever it is. Um, did you ever consider putting those stories down on paper?
I do. There's actually a lot of oral stories that I hope to collect and write one day. There are also some that are written in Moroccan Arabic or Darija that I am planning to translate. But yeah, there are a lot of stories that carry a lot of wisdom that I'm excited to um, make access for English readers.
How exciting. How exciting. Now, Mekeyi, you said that you have your own memoir that you're working on. Do you have anything else that you're working on that might turn into a book or not? What else are you working on?
We've got a bunch of projects, some fiction, some nonfiction, some co-authored, some not. So I've got a novel that is, it's written. I do want to make a few revisions on it, but it's pretty much ready to go. My memoir is almost ready to go. Hers is ready to go. And um, we've got a couple novels that we are planning to co-author. And we've also got the second memoir that I mentioned. So we've got a lot of projects in the works. And
It sounds like it.
we both have a lot of difficulty thinking at the level of the short story.
Yeah.
I always start trying to write a short story, and then I usually either I abandon the story or I decide that it needs to be a novel. And I was trying to like break myself of that habit. But just the other day, Itto did the same thing. She started working on a short story, and then within a couple hours, she was like, "You know what? I'm actually writing a novel." And I was like, "Okay, I guess I am too." So now we have two novels in the works that we didn't have a week ago. Yeah, so we have a lot of stories that we are trying to inscribe in different forms, and it keeps things pretty lively.
Oh, I'm sure. I am sure. So, okay, I want to jump into the Date Keepers.
Yeah.
And that is the name of your website, the datekeepers.com. So either one of you can start off with this one. How did that come about? And it's a platform for those who want to share stories, and you help folks do just that. So let me, either one of you answer how did the Date Keepers come about? And the name is interesting. So share a little bit about how that name of the website came about as well.
Sure. Yeah. So the Date Keepers we're not a dating site. It's actually a direct translation of our last name. When we got married, I took Itto's last name, which is a Tamasi. It's a surname that means the keeper of the dates, as in the fruit, the fruit of the date palm tree. And we do actually eat a lot of dates, so it's an appropriate name. So the Date Keepers is actually the English translation of our name. I mean, it arose out of our mutual love of storytelling, and the platform has been evolving and continues to evolve. But the core mission that has anchored it is we want to create a space where we do a couple things. One is we showcase the stories of people who are doing really interesting work across different fields and maybe not getting a lot of recognition, or if they are getting recognition, it's recognition for their work, but not for the stories behind that work. We're trying to focus on and give a platform to people who have, like us and like yourself, overcome some sort of serious challenge to be where they are today. And it can really be any sort of challenge. I mean, there's like poverty is a monster, but so is trauma. You might be raised in like a wealthy middle class family and still have a lot of like deep emotional generational trauma that's not addressed. So we are not narrow in our definition of what constitutes hardship. And we're not narrow in our definition of what constitutes an accomplishment because we work with people from a lot of different fields. We are trying to find people who are doing really cool things in their fields, whatever fields they are. And we're kind of interested in elevating people in STEM because even though the sciences as a discipline in many ways are much more privileged than the arts, but individual scientists often face a lot of personal challenges. Like they have to like distort their work often to get publication. They often have to contribute to a lot of projects that they don't get any credit for. They often get controlled by their academic advisors or by other entities that whoever's the head of their research lab. Individual scientists face a lot of those challenges. And because we think of STEM as a privileged field, we often don't think about the challenges that individuals face. So that's one thing we're trying to do is show that, yeah, there's a lot of money in science, but that doesn't mean that everyone who works in the sciences is having it easy. So that's
also sorry, but also the multilingualism. For example, Alpha, we did a story that the person struggles because English is not their first language. And writing in a language that is not your first, that is like your fifth or seventh, is a challenge. And that I think also presents a barrier for scientists to tell their own story in their own way. So we're happy to be kind of like a window to, or like a mediator between the scientists, the challenges they face, the scientists and what they face, and also translate that to lay people.
And it's not part of their training to tell their own stories. And sometimes when you're dealing with trauma or challenges, telling your story is one of the best ways to process that. But it's so we're trying to create a bridge between the scientists and the artists, and that's one prong of what we're doing. The other prong is to try to create a platform for journalists and nonfiction writers to publish their work, develop their work, hone their voices, and retain a high degree of creative control. We don't put a whole lot of strictures on what we want people to write. We want it to be of high quality, of excellent literary quality, and if people have a good story and they want to write it themselves, but they are still developing their editorial skills, we provide editorial feedback to our contributing writers. We provide professional mentorship, support, and publication opportunities. So those are the two prongs of what we're doing, elevating people who are doing interesting work across different fields, and also creating a space for nonfiction writers and journalists to hone their craft. And our ultimate hope is to foster interdisciplinary collaborations that might not happen otherwise.
What a great, like I said earlier, a great platform that you're providing.
I actually don't do it anymore, but people used to reach out to me and say, like, can you interview me? And I want to write your story. But now I am very careful about who to interview, because sometimes people just call me and kind of like just tell me everything and then later say, don't get this interview, I'm not comfortable. But for example, just last year, I had someone who said, oh, I was homeless, I was sexually abused, but I don't want my husband to know. And I was shocked because my husband knows everything about me. I don't think I would feel comfortable living with someone, loving someone, and don't share my past with them. And if they were to judge me, then I don't want that person in my life, because my past is my past. And also, it's not something I did, but rather something that was done to me. So I think there's a lot of barriers. And there's, of course, linguistics, and sometimes some people's brains are not just meant to be storytellers' brains. but sometimes some people have the ability to tell their stories. It's just there's a lot of cultural and emotional barriers.
There's the widespread belief in a lot of cultures, and it's present in American culture, but I've gotten the sense that it's even more intense in many other cultures, that the sciences are just much harder than the arts. And if you go into the sciences, then you earn your place. But if you go into the arts, then you weren't good enough to get into the sciences. And I don't think that's right. I think that one of the reasons that the sciences seem that much harder is that a lot of people get forced into them because they maybe do have a passion for going into the arts, and then they feel that social pressure to do the thing that is seen as more prestigious, and they get forced to do the sciences. And maybe they're good at that too, but it's not their real passion, or it's not their only passion, and they have to cut off a part of themselves. So in the arts, yeah, you get a lot of people who were not forced into anything and maybe don't have a lot of direction in life, and for some of them that's exactly what they need. But I think it's created this weird imbalance that is not servicing anyone well in terms of how we think about both parts of like human creativity and production. And it really would serve us better to recognize it's all hard. It's hard in different ways, and we need to recognize and acknowledge the different sorts of challenges that you face depending on what sort of discipline you're in. And then we need to figure out how we can pool our skills and integrate them in a way that is useful for all of us.
Right, to make the world a better place.
Yes.
Whatever that means.
Whatever that means, right, exactly. Whatever that means. All right, now we're going to get ready to wrap this up. This has been an amazing conversation. So I want to thank both of you again for being my guests. I've just truly enjoyed this conversation with both of you. But I have one last question I want to ask you, because you both talked about writing and words and how they, oral stories and all of that. So I want to ask each of you, do you have a word that you heard or you learned long ago or just yesterday that just hits you and you think, oh my goodness, what a beautiful word, or it just slams you with some sort of an emotion or feeling? So for each of you, do you have a word that has done that for you?
I have a lot of words. I think as a trained linguist, I am also, my undergrad, as I said earlier, is in linguistics. I love all words in all languages equally. But one thing that we do is we make a story out of words, and we actually enjoy the words we made. For example, I'm sure a lot of writers and people who work sitting on the computer feel that too much tightness when you are sitting on your chair and typing, and the characters, whether fiction or nonfiction, just forcing you to type. Mekeyi and I made up a word, and it is squinchy. No language I know, and I asked a lot of my friends who speak other languages, has a term to describe what happens to you when you're sitting.
People say like muscle tightness or something, but it does not capture it. It's inadequate. Like we had to come up with a word that actually is suitable to the experience.
Yeah. Well, I've made up my own words as well, so I think that's awesome.
Yes.
Okay, so is that the word, or do you each have? Okay, I'm going to give you an example. This is a few years ago. I was reading something and the word Scytherism showed up. And I went, I love how that sounds. I like saying it out loud. I wasn't completely sure what it meant, so I looked it up. And Scytherism is the sound that wind makes as it blows through leaves. And I thought, that is so beautiful. It's like a whisper. And so that word is one that is stuck with me, Scytherism. And I literally wrote a short story about that word.
There you go. You make a story out of it.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's why I like to ask folks every once in a while, do you have a word that just, does something for you? That was a word for me, Scytherism. So Mekeyi, do you have a word that?
So I don't always think on the level of the word, because words get their meaning from one another and from the context that they're in. So I'm usually thinking at least at the level of the sentence. But I do have an interesting relationship with the word desultory, which I actually only learned last year. And I learned it because I was reading a lot of Joan Didion. And I don't have this experience often anymore of hitting a completely new vocabulary word. And then she kept using the word desultory. I think she's used it more than any other writer. It's like it's her keyword, I think. And and eventually I looked it up and it means kind of aimless and without purpose. And I was like, this is interesting because I think in many ways, the affliction that I see in my parents and that I wrestled with for many years could be described as a sort of desultoriness, a lack of purpose, a lack of conviction that anything is worth doing. I mean, I knew the word apathy, I knew other words to describe that experience, but there was something about this word popping out of Joan Didion's prose again and again and trying to grab my attention. I don't think I had that aesthetic response that you described to Cytherism, where I was like, oh, I love this word, I can't wait to use it. But it was more like an itch. It was like, this keeps poking me in a place that I find a little bit irritating, and maybe there's a reason why. And then I started to put the pieces together. I was like, yeah, that's the word I needed all along, and I didn't have it.
What a cool word.
Yeah.
Desultory. When you first said it, I thought it was going to mean something along the lines of desolate.
Well, it kind of does. It suggests an emotional desolation, like action without intention,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know if it's cognate. It might be.
What an interest. I've not heard that word. So gosh, how
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Didion uses it all the time. I think it's her favorite word.
How interesting. Gosh. Now see how fun this is, sharing words.
Yes. Thank you so much. I love the exercise. It's a
Thank
great
you.
one.
Yeah, it is. So I want to thank both of you for being my guest. This has been, like I said earlier, a true pleasure. I ask all of my guests before we wrap up to toss out a nugget of hope to the listeners. So I've got two of you today. So all you listeners out there, you're going to get two nuggets of hope. So whoever wants to go first, if you could toss out a nugget of hope to the listeners, something that they can tuck away and carry with them for the rest of the day.
Sure. Mine has a little bit of a story to it. But Ito's favorite author is Dostoevsky, and I hadn't read Dostoevsky until we got together, and I decided to read him to understand Ito better, and also because she draws on him in her work, which I was collaborating on. So the first book by Dostoevsky that I read was the English title is The Possessed, and it's a controversial book. It's about what happens to a small Russian town in the late 19th century when the social order starts to break down and people start to absorb anarchic and radical socialist ideas, and they don't have a framework to fit those into, and people just sort of spin out into various forms of madness and anti-socialism. And the title is interesting because it also has been translated as the devils or the demons, because the Russian word besi means, I think I'm pronouncing that right, I'm not sure, but it means the entities who possess. And it can mean literal spirits or demons, but it also can mean, Dostoevsky uses it to mean the ideas and the narratives that possess us and that lead us to behave in certain ways and to do certain things. And I see a lot of people behaving in dysfunctional ways. And it was a little bit, it lightened me a little bit to think about it that way and to think, well, it's not a part of who that person is. It's a possession. I guess the more technical version of that metaphor is a program they're running, but I think possession is actually more apt because we absorb these narratives consciously or unconsciously, and then we act them out, and we may or may not realize how that story ends. Before we absorb a story, we really need to think it through to the end and know how it ends. But if we do that, we can free ourselves of some of the unhealthier possessions. Yeah,
No,
I guess the nugget is we are not the stories that we tell. We can separate ourselves from them.
interesting. Yeah, we're not the stories that we tell because most times we're not telling the truth from behind those masks that everybody wears each day. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, next up.
For me, the main thing is invest in a healthy relationships. make sure to choose the right people in the right place and in the right time, because life is short and we all, as they say, always we only live once. And you don't want to find yourself 90 or 80 years old regretting the past. Take each day as it's the only day you have, but also don't forget to plan for tomorrow. And again, make sure to invest in healthy relationships.
Surround yourself with the right people. Very nice. Very nice. Well, thank you both so much for being my guest today. And I want to keep in touch because I want to know when the book comes out, and I want to know what else is going on. Because
Sure,
you
yeah.
guys are doing all kinds of stuff, and you have all kinds of projects that you listed earlier that you're working on. So you're going to be busy for quite some time, but truly, I do love the platform that you're providing for those who have everybody has a story. Each person has a story. They just may not want to share it, or it may never get shared for whatever reason. And you're providing a platform for folks to just give them that little nudge saying, hey, we want to hear your story. We want to help you tell it. And I just think that's awesome. All of you out there listening, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And I hope that you grab onto those nuggets that they tossed out. And there were numerous nuggets throughout this conversation, folks. So I hope that you were able to pick some of those up and then you can carry them with you. Again, thank you for being my guest today. You guys are awesome. Awesome. You're both filled with light. And I love that. I love that about you guys. And everybody out there listening, have an awesome rest of your day. And thanks so much for tuning in. This is Kim Langling, your host of Let Fear Bounce. Everybody be well, stay well, and be blessed. And that is a wrap, my fearless friends. Thanks for bouncing along with me on another episode of Let Fear Bounce. I hope you're feeling a bit motivated and ready to take on any challenge that might come your way in the coming days. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode of Let Fear Bounce. Tune in each week for your dose of inspiration from my amazing guests from all over the world. So until next time, keep bouncing forward and stay fearless, my friends. Everybody be well, stay well, and above all, be blessed.